Okay, everybody, welcome. Good evening. My name is Michael Fortin, and it's my pleasure to be your host for our QuickBooks workshop on recording expenses. I've been a QuickBooks educator for more than 15 years. I've been an adult educator um, for going on 30 years and spent a lot of time doing accounting and bookkeeping classes at Gardner High School and got my degree from Thomas College in Education and decided to work more closely with adult learners. And so my teaching career has been working with many different small business owners throughout the years. And it's been great getting a chance to learn about different businesses and all of the different challenges that businesses face with regard to accounting and record keeping. And we've partnered together with Score. Score reached out to me some years ago and asked that I um, teach workshops on QuickBooks, and we've been doing that together for quite a long time. It's been started off just in the physical classroom in different Score chapters throughout the state, and then since the pandemic, everyone shifted to online, and this has proven to be very convenient for people across the state of Maine and even beyond to attend these workshops and get the benefit of some good discussion and instruction on QuickBooks. So anyway, I'm glad that you're all here, and we are going to spend the evening together talking about QuickBooks expenses, QuickBook Online. This is intended to be a workshop on this, like one specific topic, although if you have questions outside of the topic area, I'll do my best to answer those. We do have a full agenda. I mean, the normal time it takes to learn the entire QuickBooks application is roughly about 45 hours of instruction or 15 weeks. So it's a really large program. It's comprehensive. There's a lot to it. And there's a lot of great things. So it's very, very difficult to dedicate time, that kind of time, unless you're taking a undergraduate course in it. So these workshops are just small bite-sized nuggets of information to help people. And uh, we also make the assumption that everybody here has had some experience with QuickBooks, although you don't have to. QuickBooks has several different versions, but we will be using the QuickBooks Online version for this workshop. And it's the QuickBooks Online has been the primary method in which people use the system. And we'll talk about that more a little bit um, as we go along here. But it's a great program. It's not the only program out there, but it is probably one of the most popular, and um, a lot of tax preparers and accountants almost demand their clients use it because it makes it that much easier to manage, and if everybody's using the same system. So we're going to focus though our attention just on expenses for tonight. I'm going to put some slides up on the screen here in just a minute. Just a couple of housekeeping items. That there's no break. We're going to go till 7:30 tonight. If you have a question, this is meant to be interactive, so I hope that you feel comfortable enough to just simply unmute your microphone and ask a question anytime you have one. I'll pause at times too to give you an opportunity to do that. But if there's a a topic that's on the screen and you're really interested in it, would like clarification, don't hesitate to just jump in and ask that question. There's a small enough group here tonight that we can do that informally. There's also the Q&A feature, the chat the chat that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we can communicate that way, but much easier if we can just talk through it. Um, and it's hopefully it'll be a great learning experience for everybody. And I always learn a thing or two from the students because you ask such good questions. So I'm looking forward to this evening. Another point to make is that if anybody would like copy of the slides that I'm using, I can provide those after the fact at the end, so you don't have to take down every word I say. But I always encourage note taking. It's a great way to help the learning process, and um, people do learn differently, of course, but writing things down as you're hearing them, for a lot of people does help commit it to memory. So it's great if you want to take notes. And let me see the other things. No, I think that covers most of it. Let's go ahead and put the slide up here, and my information is on here. So if you have a question about tonight's material and you want to reach out and get clarification on something, there's my email address, michaelwfortin@gmail.com. And be sure to reach out anytime. I do also, one other point is that we are going to be using a together. I would encourage you to follow along with me in QuickBooks to actually open up the QuickBooks test drive environment. And I'm going to give you the link to that because the best way to practice this is, of course, to try it along with me. I'm going to show you everything on the screen, but so the best possible experience though would be is if you try it on your own. And the test environment is called Test Drive, and that link can be used outside of this workshop. And it's just a great resource for anybody who wants to use QuickBooks in practice. And if you're not sure how to enter a transaction, or if you've never used a certain feature before and you like to practice with it so you do not disrupt your actual QuickBooks learning, your QuickBooks company file, and actually enter transactions into your real company. It's just a great way to experiment safely in a sandbox environment. Okay, so I do not want anybody to use your actual company information as we go through this. So the QuickBooks Online, just real brief overview, is a cloud-based accounting system. It is a monthly fee-based system. You subscribe to it on a monthly basis, and it is accessible anytime, anywhere, from any kind of device, which makes it very attractive because you don't need to have a certain version of the software for a certain device. It's accessible from any device, across devices. However, you must have access to the internet. So you cannot use the system unless you have internet access. So if you wanted to take your laptop with you, to your camping trip up in the far reaches of the state, and there's no cell phone service, no data access, then you would not be able to use the system. So you must have access to the internet. There are 4 basic levels of QuickBooks Online: the Simple Start, Essentials, Plus, and Advanced. Most students that I work with end up using the Plus level because the Plus level has the majority of the features which most businesses need. And it is suitable for most types of businesses. So whether you're a nonprofit or a service-based business or product-based business, you can use QuickBooks Online for any of those ventures. Just a real simple, a lot of information on here, but it very simply lays out the 4 different levels. The plus level of online runs at $85 a month or $1,020 annually. And if you want to add payroll to that, that will add an additional $45 a month plus a fee for each employee that you have. But again, most people end up at the plus level because if you have Simple Start or Essentials, you cannot track inventory. There's no inventory control. So most people do need inventory. Even though the QuickBooks Online inventory is very, very basic and it can't do lots of like high level type of things. It does work for most businesses, and if you're selling products, you'll definitely need the inventory piece. So you're committed right there to go to the plus level automatically if you have inventory. So anyway, that's just a basic overview of QuickBooks Online. And the other versions of QuickBooks that are out there, if you use one of the other versions, and you're not familiar with QuickBooks Online, this will be different. It'll look different, and the screens are different. The layout is different. So there's really nothing similar about them. The concepts are the same, but the application itself is very different. So on your screen here, this is the QuickBooks test drive link that we're going to use together. I'm going to go ahead and paste this inside the chat. So you can then use that to access it. One thing I will say about the link is that although it works very well, a couple of little quirks about it. One is that if you are already a QuickBooks Online subscriber, then when you click that link, QuickBooks may ask you to log in to your existing business, because if you have cookies stored within your browser, QuickBooks tries to get you to log into your account. So if you find that that's a problem, you can't get around the login screen, then try a different browser. 99% of the time, that will allow you to connect properly, right? So in other words, if you normally use Google Chrome to get into your QuickBooks Online, then paste that link, copy it, paste it using Edge or Firefox or some other browser, and then that should allow you to get right in. The QuickBooks test drive does not require any sort of password or username, and you should not need to enter one. Okay. So let's talk about the objectives of tonight, what we're going to cover in this workshop on expenses. We're going to work on setting up vendors in the vendor list. We will talk about class tracking, so understanding how to use classes in QuickBooks. We will talk about job costing as well, and then entering expense transactions in several different ways. That'll be a fairly lengthy piece out of our agenda tonight, and then managing accounts payable transactions, and then if we have time, we'll get into voiding checks and how to do that. Okay, let's start the discussion in this description of entering expenses. Okay, so you have two basic situations here. If you're dealing with a cash vendor, that means that you've paid for something, and you've recorded that expense right at that time, and you're not paying it on time, right? It's not a loan. It's not something that you've purchased on a credit card or on an account, a charge account with a vendor of some kind. If you're dealing with a cash scenario, and by cash, that means you could also be writing a check or using your debit card. That's all the same. That is the simplest situation, the easiest to record. It's the least amount of steps. It's very simply a transaction that you record, which will record the expenditure of that money, and it will also capture the type of expense that it is. So that's one transaction will do all that, and does not use accounts payable. So you do not have any sort of balance that you would owe to that vendor. And that's one way of entering expenses into QuickBooks. The other way is the credit vendor, where you would receive a bill and enter that bill into QuickBooks, and then use QuickBooks to monitor and manage the payables that you owe. And then as a separate and distinct step, you will pay that bill using the bill payments feature. And again, tracking that all through accounts payable. So no matter which scenario it is, they both will allow you to, of course, capture the expense and track what you're spending your money on, and give you all of that. But there are extra steps when you're dealing with a credit situation. But there's a credit situation exists in a lot of businesses, and it's nothing to be afraid of, for sure. It's in some cases, students will ask, why would somebody take the time to enter a bill if I just pay my bills anyway? Like, for example, I get a bill, I just simply pay it, and that's fine if your business is small enough and you don't deal with vendors who you must pay on time, or if you don't have any sort of loans or credit cards or anything like that, then you may not need to use the payable feature, but we're still going to cover it nonetheless. Okay. I'm just going to also refer you to the chart that's on your screen. This is a little bit of I think, in-depth explanation that analyzes different types of expenses. Really, I'm just comparing on the left column cash vendors and on the right column credit vendors. And there are different features and functions that apply in each of those situations. So it's nice to go through this because it also helps us learn a little bit more about what QuickBooks can do. So, for example, we'll take the first row that goes across, right? Recording a purchase order. So what's a purchase order? Purchase orders are used by many businesses to track the items that you're ordering for customers, right? So if you're a contractor, and let's say you're an electrical contractor, and you go to your local electric supply house, and you need to order a bunch of supplies, it's common to issue a purchase order, and give a purchase order, which does a couple things. It tracks the stuff that you ordered and who it's for, which project it's for. It also provides the vendor whom you're buying it from that you authorize the purchase and that it's approved, right? So if my business is large enough, I may have several people doing projects in the field, and that purchase order tells the company that it's an approved purchase from their company, and so it's provides some checks and balances in the system. It keeps just from anybody from walking in and purchasing something. So purchase orders are a function within QuickBooks, and you can do them. Purchase orders are non-posting entries, meaning that I can create purchase orders all day long, but there's no financial impact to any of my accounts in QuickBooks. If I were to create a purchase order, they show up in the vendor center under the vendor's name. So for example, if it was the Acme electrical supply house, when I bring up Acme in the vendor center, it'll show any purchase orders that I've created for them. As a means of tracking like what I bought. But in order to have that purchase order have any impact, I would have to convert that purchase order into a bill. In other words, I'd actually have to place the order, then the vendor sends me a bill for the stuff I bought. At that point, the purchase order now can be converted into a bill, which then becomes a financial transaction that will impact my accounts. But purchase orders by themselves are not. The other thing is that in a cash situation, we don't usually do purchase orders, only on a credit basis. So we have the first row across showing only purchase orders applicable to credit vendors. Okay. The second one is recording a bill from a vendor. So again, if I'm doing cash, I don't usually get a bill. I don't need a bill. I'm paying at the time that I make the purchase and therefore don't need one. However, under a credit scenario, the enter bill, um, you know, portion of the process is kind of the first step. I place the order with the vendor. They will send me a bill. Recording that bill will capture the expense, and allow QuickBooks to remember what I spent my money on and put it in the appropriate account. It will also put that bill into accounts payable for me to manage the balance so that it reminds me to pay it and that I pay it on time. Okay, so the third and final row here is paying the bill. So under cash scenario, I only have one step here: write a check or enter a debit card transaction or pay cash. Any one of those are all the same impact. Um, it's kind of a one and done situation under cash, right? I just simply enter that transaction. It records the expense and the outflow of money at the same time. Under a credit scenario, paying the bill is the final step in the process. It is a separate step from entering the bill or the purchase orders. So, and if I were to kind of step back and look and compare the left cash column and the right credit column, you can see that there's more steps involved in a credit scenario. So we're going to cover how to enter expenses in both of these situations. But the first thing we do before we enter anything is we must have a vendor in QuickBooks to associate with the transaction. So we must set up a vendor. So vendors, the definition of vendors would be from anyone from whom you purchase products or services. So your power bill, your vendor would be Central Maine Power, for example, right? So they're the example of a vendor. Or your cell phone bill, or automobile loans, or just going and getting fuel for your company vehicle. Any sort of vendor you do business with, that is under the umbrella of vendors, and you must tell QuickBooks who you are giving the money to, who you are spending your money with. So you must have a vendor for every transaction. For those of you who have used electronic banking, the vendors sometimes come through kind of strange, right? So, one example, let's say that I use my Camden National Bank debit card and I pull in to Irving and I get gas. Okay, and I go to the Irving in Portland on Commercial Street, and I get gas and let's say $50 in gas and maybe $25 inside the store for snacks and food. So a total of a $75 purchase. When that comes through on my electronic banking, it may say store number 2983 Commercial Street. And that's all it says as far as the description of where I spent that money. It might not even say Irving, maybe not. So when QuickBooks reads that transaction, if you have electronic banking, it will set up a vendor that says store number 2973. It'll add that as a vendor in the vendor center, right? So every transaction that I do will end up being a vendor in the vendor center. Another point is that, of course, that $75, when I categorize it when it comes through my in my list, my bank feed, in the list of transactions that are pending my approval. I need to allocate which expense account that $75 go to. Without having like a receipt or some recollection, that $75 should technically be split up into two different accounts, $50 for fuel and $25 for meals. When it comes through electronic banking, it will not tell me exactly what I bought. It will just have the total amount. So the benefit of like having a receipt or something to refer to is very, very helpful. So I always recommend people get receipts. And even if you don't manually enter the receipt into QuickBooks, which you can do, and if you don't have a lot of transactions, it's frankly just as easy as doing that than the electronic banking is in some cases. But keep your receipt so that you can refer to it and know exactly what you spent your money on. Some of them are going to be pretty easy, right? Electronic banking that comes through. For example, Central Maine Power again, right? You paid your business electricity bill. That's pretty obvious what that expense is for. There's not any question. But some places like a department store or a convenience store, you could purchase, or Amazon or any like online retailers, right? You could purchase any number of things from those businesses. So you need to just remember how to categorize it correctly. Okay, so just a little side comment on that. So the first thing we will do is set up a vendor, and it's really easy to do. We're going to practice together. We're going to use the sample company that's in the test drive called Craig's Design and Landscaping Services. And we're going to set up a vendor, and the vendor is going to be Morning Supplies. Okay, Morning Supplies will be the vendor. All right, so I'm going to go over now to my QuickBooks test drive environment, and hopefully you have had success with the link, and you are now in test drive also for Craig's Design and Landscaping Services. So we can do this together. So from the left menu, I'm going to go to expenses and hover over expenses, and I will see the menu pop out to the right, and I'm going to select vendors. And that will bring me to the vendor center. And so if you're new to QuickBooks Online, just to point out, right, this left menu that I'm using, you can see if I hover over expenses, it gives me a number of choices, which has overview, expenses, expense claims, bills, and so forth, all the way down the line. If you look across the top of the screen at the tabs behind the black menu in the expense center, you will see all of those same menu items as tabs across the top. So if you were to hover over expenses and click overview, for example, it brings you to the overview screen. You can quickly jump from overview over to the vendors by using the tab at the top of the screen. So just to make sure everybody who might be new to QuickBooks Online is aware of that these tabs here mimic what's on the menu. Okay, so I see the new vendor button, this green button. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and it's going to open up a new vendor screen. Another thing I will say about the test drive is that it is a little laggy, as my kids like to say, who play lots of games. And when something is laggy, they tell me about it, which means that it's slow and kind of lazy. So the test environment is at times a little laggy because it's just not the same system that they use in production with the real subscription, real paid customers. And the other thing is that it is mostly identical to the production environment, but if you have a lower subscription level, the test drive we are using is the advanced test drive. So this gives you access to all of the features that QuickBooks offers. So it may look a little different than the screen you normally would use, in that it gives you more choices and more options. All right, so we're going to enter in the company name, Morning Supplies. Okay, and there's a bunch of different fields in here. I'll just review them with you briefly, but we do not have to fill them all in at this point. So the only thing you need to create the vendor is just the name. But you can see that you capture a lot of information in here that's important. And, I would encourage you to take the time to, use QuickBooks to track important information that you'll find useful later. So I've got company name. I have a place where I can enter in an individual as well, or both. If I have a business that also I deal with one specific person, I can put their name in here in addition to the business name. I have a place for their email, their phone number, and their address as I scroll down through. Okay. You have the ability to record an address for this vendor, but if I wanted to have multiple ship to addresses, that is not a feature of QuickBooks Online. I have an area for notes and attachments, so which is cool if you have a contract with that vendor, or a business card, or any sort of documentation or information that you'd like to capture. You can record it as part of the vendor record. You can attach a file up to 20 megs in size. So, definitely for most uses, you can put a sizable file like a contract in there without any problem, because that would be a pretty big PDF file to be 20 megs. But you can attach different things. You can also record the vendor's banking information, and any additional information like their tax ID, whether they are a 1099 vendor, whether we need to send them 1099s, their standard billing rates, account number. So these are some of these fields, of course, may not apply to your situation, but they're all here and available if you need them. And then the default expense category. So the default expense category is helpful for, like if I was setting up an account for, again, I'll use like your electricity provider, let's say Central Maine Power, for example. The account you typically would use would be like utilities expense or electricity expense or something similar. And you can assign that default expense account to that vendor. So every time you bring the vendor up, it will automatically bring up that expense account as the default value to save you time from having to search it out and enter it. There's also an opening balance field. The opening balance is only used when you are converting QuickBooks to an existing company that's had used some other accounting system. So if you're using an Excel spreadsheet, for example, and you're tracking all of the balances that you owe to different vendors, and on November 1st, you have decided to convert over to QuickBooks Online, you can use the opening balance field to bring the amount you owe that vendor into QuickBooks so you can begin tracking it using the QuickBooks payable feature. So it's kind of a one-time thing. You would never use opening balance unless you're converting your accounts over from some other accounting system. Otherwise, it just isn't used. Another cool feature is that I also have the ability to add custom fields. And so I can use custom placeholders for different types of information. I've had students with small businesses who create fields to, like, capture the name of the spouse of the person, or the anniversary dates or birthday, or their preferred, like one student had a spa, like a small spa, and they had kept used a field in custom fields to track which um color was used whenever they came in for a hair dye. They could refer to that color, so every time they came in, they could just open it up and look and see what they used. So there's all kinds of different things you can use custom fields for, and you can add custom fields to the reports within QuickBooks. So if you want to have that as a value that shows up on a report, you can do that too. So it's really, really helpful. So that is the first page of the demographics information here. You can see across the top there are buttons. If I click the first button, it brings us to name and contact. If I click the second button, it brings us to address, right? So each one of those buttons are shortcuts that bring us to the different sections of the page, but I have gone through now all of them. So the only thing we're going to do here is simply leave the name. We won't enter an address or anything. I'm going to click save, and that vendor will be recorded in the vendor center. So to confirm that it's in there, we can first, we'll look and we'll see it shows us morning supplies is now here. There's no balance, no activity yet. But I'm going to click the left link. It says vendors with the left arrow, and go back to the list of all of my vendors. And if I scroll down alphabetically under the letter M for morning supplies, I'll see it listed here. Okay, so step one done. So that's great. Just to tell you, if you do close out of the test drive, either accidentally or at the end of the night, anything that you've done in test drive will be gone. It will disappear, so that next time you open it, you will have a fresh copy of it. So try not to accidentally close the tab during our workshop, the browser during our workshop tonight, so you don't lose the work that you've completed. Okay, are there any questions thus far?
Yeah, Michael, I have one.
Go right ahead.
What's tomorrow? What's tomorrow?
I think it was a gentleman that was asking a question. What was your question?
Hey, Mike, what's tomorrow?
Okay, Michael, the question is, like, in my QuickBooks, the company name does not appear. Like in your case, you have vendor name and company name. But in my case, not all the vendors have the company name. And for some reason, there is a vendor called check number 105, check number 106. What do you think is going on?
So you go to expenses on the left menu. You have expenses, right?
Yes.
You hover over expenses, and then you see in the menu that appears to the right, you see vendors.
Yes.
Okay, and you click vendors. All right, and you do not see the alphabetical list.
I do see the list.
Okay.
Let me see. I don't see the company name. Let's
Oh.
see. How can I get to that? Like that Bob Burgers. Why the company name is not there for Bob Burgers? What could be the reason there? Or
What you are in the test company, right?
no, I'm using my
Yeah.
real.
Oh yes, you need to use the test company.
Okay.
So if you look in the chat, did you see the chat, the link in the chat that has
yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Go ahead, and if you use that, you hopefully will see exactly what I see. And let me know if you have any other questions on it.
Okay.
So sure. All right. Any other questions?
I
Okay.
know. What's today's day? Tomorrow?
Question. This is Julie.
Yes.
So if I had a monthly bill for like CMP, would that be under bills or under vendor? Would I set CMP up under vendors or under bills?
Under vendors.
Vendors, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep. You're welcome. Okay. Anything else? Okay, looks like we got everything. So let's keep going along. So we have the vendor entered. We're ready to go to the next part of this. I'm going to go back and
I know.
share my screen again. Me. Okay. Class tracking. Just out of curiosity, using the actually this would be helpful. Before we do that, let me I've got a poll question up on the screen. I'm wondering if you could tell me what version of QuickBooks that you currently use. That would be great if you could answer that question. And then a second question, how long have you currently used QuickBooks? I'll give you just another minute to get those in. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and end it. Looks like there's a few of you haven't answered it yet, but that's all right. So it looks like, of course, everybody here, out of the 5 people who answered the question, I have everybody's an online user, and we have no brand new in terms of like people who don't use QuickBooks currently, have never used it. So that's interesting. Usually there's somebody in the class that's never used it, so that's good. Everyone's got some experience with it, although we do have somebody that's a brand new user, and then the rest of you are kind of all spread out, anywhere from 2 to 6 months or 7 to 12 months using it, and then the 1 to 2 year person would be I guess the veteran of the group. So that's awesome. So thank you. That's very helpful to know. So so out of those of you who may have had a little bit more experience than a month or two, this question may pertain more to you, but what has anybody been using or have used the class tracking feature? That would be interesting to know. So you can put it in the chat, or you could raise a thumbs up on your reaction bar. I'd kind of like to know how many of you have used class tracking before.
I'm sorry, I was trying to tell you I do not use QuickBooks. I don't have a business yet.
Okay.
I don't have a need for it. I'm just trying to learn the process as it is.
Okay. That's cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, and let's see. Anybody not use class tracking? No. Okay. All right. All right, that's very, very helpful. Okay, so I'll explain what class tracking is at its, thank you very much, at the very basic level, because it is a very cool feature in QuickBooks, and I think you'll find that it's helpful to know about it, and a lot of different businesses will use it, this feature. So class tracking allows you to separate your income and expenses by department, location, profit center, or any other meaningful breakdown of your business. So I'll explain that all in layman's terms, however, so you can understand it. All right. So for example, let's say that I have a restaurant, okay, and my restaurant has 2 locations. So it's Mike's Eats. Let's say that I have one in Portland and another location in South Portland. All right. So if I wanted to track how much money that each of those locations was earning, and that means record the income that came into each location plus the expenses that each location had, and then determine how much money I made at each place. And at the same time, figure out as how much I made overall, right? In order to do that accounting, what I would typically need to do without class tracking is I would have to set up separate accounts in my chart of accounts for each of those businesses. For example, let's say in my restaurant I did delivery service. Okay, so I might have a delivery income account, but I would have to have a delivery income for Portland and a delivery income account for South Portland. Okay, because I would want to know that type of income as it relates to each place, each location. That's important for me as a business owner. I would want to know if delivery in one location is doing better than another location, or I might want to decide I don't want to do delivery anymore altogether because it doesn't bring in a whole lot of money. So it would be important to have that kind of tracking. Okay, and then let's say I also have rent, that I must pay rent at the locations of these businesses. So I would have a rent expense account for Portland and a rent expense account for South Portland, so that I could track how much the rent was as it pertains to each location. So I could keep using other examples, and basically the point is, for every type of income or expense, I would have to have 2 of every account, right? I'd have to create. So my chart of accounts, my listing of all those income and expense categories would get very large. I would have all kinds of them. So with class tracking, I can eliminate all of the extra accounts. It allows me to tag the income or the expenses to the location that it's associated with, without having to have separate accounting for all of it. Okay, so class tracking is a feature within QuickBooks Online, and by default it's turned off. So you do need to turn that feature on. And I'm not even sure that it's available at all the subscription levels, right? You would, if you are a paid subscriber and you have one of the higher subscription levels, you would definitely have it, but I'm not sure if it's available for the lower ones. But let's take a look at where you would turn it on anyway, so you can see that. So we're going to navigate to the gear menu, and I'll show you in a moment. The gear menu in the upper right-hand corner. And we're going to look under the menu that appears under your company. You'll see account and settings. And then once we get into the account and settings menu, we're going to go to advanced. And then under advanced, you'll see an option to turn class tracking on.
You said this is only on the advanced one?
It may only be on the advanced or the plus.
Okay.
Yes. Which is why that's kind of another example as to why a lot of students eventually end up upgrading to the higher subscription, because a lot of the features and functions that businesses really need are only available in those higher subscriptions. So they really get you. They want you to subscribe, right? And get the higher level. So and then we turn the feature on. So I'm going to walk through it now step by step so you show you where it is. So I'm going to go back into online. So upper right hand corner, I'm going to click the gear menu. And I'm going to slide over to under the Your Company section. I'm going to go down to Accountant Settings. Now we'll open up the Accountant Settings window. And then I'm going to go under Advanced. Actually, hold on. It's still loading, so it's a little laggy, as they say. Okay, and under Advanced, you'll see Track Classes, and it's turned off. So I just simply click on the off, and I'm going to turn on the Track Classes, turn the green button on. I'm going to put a check mark in this field that says warn me when a transaction isn't assigned a class. So if you turn that feature on, what it means is that every single time I save a transaction, it will prompt me and say, hey, you forgot to assign a class. So if it's a feature you don't intend to use all the time, it may possibly get annoying. So you might not want to turn on the warn me option. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do that and click save. And we see now Track Classes is now turned on. And we'll click Done in the lower right-hand corner. And it's good to go. So by benefit of turning on the class tracking, like what does that do for us? I'm going to go back to my slides here and show you, right? You'll see that on my slide, I now have a column that says class, right? So if I was entering a bill, this is an example of a bill that's on your screen. And if I were recording this bill for somebody that I was that I owed money to, right? One of the fields in this bill is now class. So I could associate and tag it to a class. So let's say that I was entering a bill. Once again, I'll use my electricity bill. Let's say it was Central Maine Power. I was entering this as an expense. I could associate it to say which location or which class is it for. So I might say, okay, this is for the Portland location, or this is South Portland. So it allows me to then tag that. Okay. And then once I start using it, there are reports in QuickBooks, like this one has profit and loss by class report. And this would allow me to see all of the income and expenses as it associates to that location. So very important, financial report of a business is the profit and loss, right? Because that tells you whether you're making money or losing money. So if I can open a profit and loss by class, I basically can see a profit and loss for every location, for every class that I have of that business. And it allows me to really determine whether a certain location is making money or losing money. And of course, all of this is helpful only to the extent that you are entering in the information correctly, right? QuickBooks is a great system. It works very, very well. but it's only as good as the information you're putting into it. So if you don't tag a location properly, and if you forget to categorize something, or if you don't forget to enter a transaction, or whatever the situation may be, right? You know, all of that is basically the you know, you will get the output that you would expect in that situation. All right, so just want to point that out, right? It's a great system, but it's kind of garbage in, garbage out kind of way of looking at it. So okay. All right, so let's go back to slides and go down here. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit because I'm checking out the time. Make sure we have time to get to the real important stuff. All right, so all right, so let's get into paying vendors, right? Recording expenses. So the different scenarios that you might pay a vendor with a check or a credit card or cash. You know, we're gonna cover those these situations and would so that you'll know exactly, you know, how to record a vendor that you're going to pay over time, like a credit vendor, and those that you're going to pay directly with check, cash, credit card, and so forth. So here are the common situations. There's 4 of them. One is to manually write a check and record that transaction in a register. So you may hopefully you have you know, a business account that's separate from your personal. I always make sure to mention that in all these workshops. When you have a business, you should have a complete separate bank account that is isolated from your personal. Personal and business should always be separate. So treat the business as though it belongs to somebody else, right? Treat it as though so if you want to pay yourself, you should write yourself a check. If you you know, want to use the business money for a personal purchase, you need to make sure to record that as owner's draw, as a personal expenditure, so that your records are accurate. You should never mix personal and business you know, in your bank accounts. Right. So, all right. So that being said, if you have a checkbook in your business bank account and you write checks, we're going to go through how that works and, you know, writing out a check and recording it. The second one is using the checks window to write and print checks right from QuickBooks. So if you'd rather use QuickBooks to print out checks using like pre-printed checks that you've ordered, you can do that also. The third are the expense forms within QuickBooks. So we'll learn how those are used. And then finally, how to enter a bill in the Enter Bills window, and then using the Pay Bills window to pay that bill. Okay, so all 4 of these options. The first one we're going to do is the manually writing a check and recording it in an account register. Okay. So I'll set up a scenario for you. Let's say that I'm going to a place called Ace Supplies. And I go into Ace Supplies and I'm going to purchase a new office chair for my computer, right? I go in, I write a check and buy the chair and leave. So there's no credit involved in this. I'm simply gonna pay and leave. So under that scenario, we'll walk through what we do here. So first thing we're gonna go to the bank register. Okay, and there's different ways of getting to the register, but we're gonna go you know, through the banking menu, and we're gonna click the button that says go to the bank register. Okay, and that is going to open up my bank register in QuickBooks. I'm going to click this little button at the top that says add check. And it's going to open up some empty fields, and I'm going to type that check into the QuickBooks register to record it. Okay, so in this scenario, we'll actually use Morning Supplies, not Ace Supplies, because we created Morning Supplies earlier. So let's use the one that we created. So it's going to be Morning Supplies, but in this case, we'll say that it's an office chair. We'll still use that example. All right, so I'm going to go back into QuickBooks, and let's walk through how to do that step by step. Okay, so on the left menu, I can see that there's the transactions left menu. So I'm going to hover over transactions. I'm going to select bank transactions, and I'm going to get into the banking center. And I see this link here. It says go to bank register. So I'm going to click that. And that will open up the register for my checking account. So if I have more than one bank account, I need to make sure that each bank account will correspond with an account in QuickBooks. So if I have a checking and a savings, I need to have both a checking and a savings in QuickBooks to mirror it. Okay, business checking, business savings. Okay, so I'm in the checking account, which is the one I want. And the very top line of the detail here where it says add check, I'm going to click that, and I'm going to add a check. All right, so we'll use today's date. It comes up automatically with check number 71 because that's the next available check in the sequence. It automatically will give you the next available number. If I've written a check out before, like check 70, the next one automatically becomes check 71. Okay, the payee. This is whom I bought this item from. So I'm going to type in Morning Supplies. If all I have to do is start to type in MORN, you can see it comes right up. I don't have to type it any further. I can just click on it to select it. There's a memo line location. I always encourage anybody to use the memo line. That means that you're going to enter like some description, some summary about what this transaction relates to. And it's always helpful to do that because it provides a way of identifying it so that if you ever were to look at a list of transactions, usually the memo line is always displayed in that list, so you can kind of see what the transactions are without having to open it. So the memo line is a helpful reference. It's also searchable. So if you do a search for a transaction, it would allow that transaction to be identified in a search. So let's say I'm gonna, purchase a new office chair. So I'll put in the memo line, office chair. The class. So if I was using the class tracking, like the Portland or South Portland, right, I could type in Portland, for example. All right, and it says, yes, add that new class. So I've added it. And let's say the chair, in this example, let me see. Let's say that it's $200. So I'll enter 200. All right, now it's gonna ask me which account that this goes to. So what type of expense is this? How do I categorize it? So if it's an office chair, it's probably going to be something like office supplies. So I'm going to scroll through this. I can actually type in the word office supplies if I wanted to, or I can scroll down and try to find it this way. Again, I'm looking for office supplies or office expenses rather. So office expenses. And then we're ready to save the transaction. All right. So I'll go ahead and just have to move my this little bar on the screen around a little bit. And click save. All right, great. So the check has been entered. All right. So what I can see, yeah, let me back up here. So what I can see is that in the checkbook, I have my ending balance, $1,001. All right, is in this account right now. And if let me open this up a little bit. My screen is because I have several windows open, you might have to move it around a little bit to see all the columns in here, but I can see that I have the $200 in here. And you can see a running balance of this of this register on the screen. So you can see all the transactions. So the balance decreased by $200 for this office expense. All right, so that's been now recorded. And just to look at the vendor center, we can go take a look and see what it looks like now under morning supplies, right? So if I on the left menu, if I go to expenses, hover over expenses and slide over to vendors and open up the vendor center, I will find morning supplies in this list. Bear with me a second. Scroll it down. There's morning supplies. So I can see that there's no balance due. It says 0, right? But if I click on morning supplies to open up the vendor record, I'll see the transaction list. All right, and I will see that check for $200 listed. That payment that we made for the office chair is listed there under the vendor record. Okay, so it's as simple as that, as recording a check. If you use electronic banking, that $200 check, when it comes through, QuickBooks should be able to match up that $200 transaction through electronic banking to the $200 check that I've already entered, so that the two match together. And that's part of the review process that I do when I approve bank transactions. When they come through the bank feed, I can match those up together easily. But the benefit of course, entering in a check ahead of time, right, is that if you only rely on electronic banking and you don't enter something like a check in advance, the actual amount of money the bank says you have, right, is overstated, because I actually have written checks that haven't been cashed yet. So entering those into QuickBooks allows me to get a real-time, balance of how much money I have left, because those checks are not known to the bank until they clear. But if I wrote out a check and mailed it, I should count that money as gone, right? So entering in the check into QuickBooks make sure that I know really how much money I have left. So, all right, so that is the first example. Any questions on that one? Okay. Let's keep going. About 19 minutes left, so we are going to keep moving along here. All right, so we're going to go to the second situation, using the write checks window to write and print checks. Okay. So the write checks window is basically a form that looks just like a check on the screen, So instead of using the register, you could use the write checks window instead. Additionally, the write checks window allows you to have QuickBooks print the checks for you if you want to print them out, so you don't hand write them. In order to use the print checks feature, you do need to purchase pre-printed paper, with magnetic ink, pre-numbered check paper that you can load into your printer and print. But you don't have to print the checks. You can use the write checks window to, just because it's easier to record checks instead of using the register. So that's fine. So the write checks window, you'll see that using the new button in the upper left-hand corner of the screen will open up the new menu, and under vendors, you'll see check as the second option down. Once you click checks, it will open up the next check, like a blank check form, where you can then fill it out and record the item, the expense that you want to record, and then it will save the transaction. So it's just a form instead of the register, but in any case, it still records that transaction in the register, just like the one you just entered in the register. So same process. So we'll use morning supplies again, and let's say we'll buy another office chair in this example. So yeah, I'm going to go back into QuickBooks and let's walk through this together. Okay, so the new button in the upper left-hand corner, click on new. Under the vendors column, you're going to select check. It's going to open up a brand new check form. All right, so here we have check number 72. The payee will enter in morning supplies, and as I start to type, that vendor will come up, so I'm going to select it. The bank account is going to be checking, and the check number 72, and the date is today. And under tags is similar to the memo line in the check register, so we should enter in some sort of tag. If you have any social media experts out there that have used hashtags, it just means that it makes that post searchable, right? So similar to QuickBooks, if I use a tag, it will allow me to search out the transaction easily. So, okay, so under tags, I'm gonna type in office chair. I gotta make sure that I don't have any errors in it there. Okay, office chair, and then I'm gonna move down under the category. You can see, because I already had a transaction with morning supplies for office expenses, it remembered that the last time I had a transaction was for that account. So it brings up office expenses automatically under this category. Now, if I wanted to, I can select something different if I need to change it, but we'll leave office expenses the way it is because that is correct. And I'll type in the description what it is that I'm going to buy, right? So new office chair, and we'll keep the same price, 200. And why don't we keep the class, instead of Portland, let's type in South Portland. I accidentally put a question mark in there. Let me take that out. South Portland, and so we'll save another class. Let's say this chair is from my other location. One for each office. Okay. And then now it captures the $200 expense. I simply do save and close. And I have now recorded the check that I wrote. So if I go back into the vendor center, if you've lost your way, I can, again, go under expenses on the left-hand menu and hover over expenses and select vendors, and that will bring up the vendor screen that you see here. And I can click on morning supplies, and it shows me now 2 transactions. See them below. The $200, the first one that I entered using the register, and the second one that I entered using the write checks window. So either way, I have entered the check. They both exist they're shown in the vendor center, and they're shown in the register, in the check register. Right. So sometimes you may have heard this, right? If it doesn't, there's multiple ways of completing something within QuickBooks. It may be something you've heard along the way. And this is an example of that, right? So I entered the check in 2 different places in QuickBooks, and in the end, we end up in the same place. The check is recorded and it's in there. So yet another way that we're gonna learn is expense forms. Okay, so we're gonna go to the next way of entering expenses. Expense forms, the third one. So we are going to use an expense form to record a lunch with a client. We had lunch with Bill, who's one of my clients, and we went to Bob's Burger Joint. We spent $24.97. So let's look and see how we can record this expense. So again, just to set this up properly, let's assume that I'm not using electronic banking, that I went to Bob's Burger Joint. I got $24.97. I got a receipt. I went back into the office and I typed it into QuickBooks as an expense. So let's illustrate how we do that. I'm going to go back in to Craig's Design and Landscaping. And I'm going to use the left-hand menu under Expenses. And as I hover over Expenses, I'm going to go to the next menu over, and I'm going to click on the second item from the top, Expenses. So within the Expenses form, you'll also notice the first 2 items that come up are the checks that I just entered from the Write Checks window. So they show up here too, which means that I could also use the expense form to record checks. So the expense form is kind of like the one-stop shopping place, if you will. One place I can enter in all different types of transactions. So let's go ahead and use the green button in the upper right-hand part of the screen. This is New Transaction. So I'll click on that. I'll click Check. Okay, so if I was going to enter in a check for this transaction, you see how it says check number 73. So it's the next check in the sequence. And this screen looks just like the Write Checks window that I used last time. So, and it is. Okay, so just to show you, like, you can enter checks from that screen also. I'm going to actually click the X in the upper right-hand corner, and we're going to close it. And I'm going to go back to the expense form. And this time we're going to enter it differently. So let's say that this $24.97 wasn't a check, it was a debit card transaction. Either way, it's the same, it's just instead of using, writing out a check, right? We're going to use our card. So I'm going to click New Transaction. And you see, out of all these selections, which one would line up with debit card? I'll just put expense. Okay, the expense is kind of like the generic, it's the 4th one down, kind of a generic catch-all. And it will open up an expense form. It'll look very much similar to the Write Checks window that we looked at. Okay, so the only thing different is in the upper left-hand corner, instead of it saying check, and having check number 71 there, or 72, it just simply says expense. So Who did I pay? Well, this time it was Bob's Burger Joint. So if I type in B-O-B, I can see Bob's Burger Joint. So I click on it and select it. Which account did I use? Well, let's say it was still my checking account. I have a debit card attached to my checking account, so we'll leave that alone. The transaction day, we'll leave it today. Once again, 10/28. Payment method. So I could use debit as a payment method if I wanted to. I don't see one in here, so I can add one. Let's type in debit. And we'll add it. And then the reference number. Maybe there is no reference number, but if it was a check, it would be the check number. You know, if it was some sort of other payment that had an associated ID number with it, we could enter it in there. But for reference number, we could leave it blank, or I could type in debit. It's kind of whatever preference works best for me. Tag. What is it that I did here? Well, this was lunch with Bill, right? So I'll use that as my tag, except lunch doesn't have an I in it. So we'll take that out, lunch with Bill, and record that. And then category. This is going to be meals. So I'm going to type in MEA, and all of a sudden I see meals and entertainment come up. Description. Lunch with Bill. And it was $24.97 is the amount. And if I wanted to put it in classes, let's say Bill was a customer from my Portland location. Well, I can use class tracking here. Tag it to Portland. And I think we're ready to save it. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Close. And it's in there. So I can see it now in my list of expenses, right? I have this Bob's Burger Joint, $24.97. It's been recorded. And if I wanted to, just to show you where these transactions are all being saved in the same location, right? Here, I'm gonna go to my check register. I just simply hover over the transactions menu item, and I went down to chart of accounts and open up this chart of accounts, and I'm going to open up the register for my checking account. And I want to show you that in the checking account, I have 3 transactions that I've created, right? I have my check number 71 for $200 for morning supplies, check number 72 for $200 for morning supplies, and Bob's Burger Joint, the $24.97, all being recorded. And that's where it's stored, in this check register. I can see that the balance of my checkbook is getting smaller as I spend money now. It was over $1,000. Now it's $776.03. So it's keeping track how much money that I have. Okay. Any questions on this before we go to the last piece? Okay, entering bills. That's the last piece. How we use QuickBooks to capture bills and pay bills. Okay, so a bill will track the amount that you owe and all the details of that purchase in accounts payable. You must use it. You must pay it using the pay bills window. So there's 2 steps involved whenever you have bill tracking. The benefit of entering bills, though, is so you can keep track of the fact that you owe money to somebody and that you need to pay that bill. And it makes sure that I can, if I don't need to pay it today, and I then can use my money to pay other bills and then get back to paying this bill. Once more customers pay me, it allows me to manage my cash flow better, right? And to plan out when I'm spending money. So payables is a very helpful feature for lots of businesses. So to enter a bill, it's using the new transaction button in the upper left-hand corner of the screen on the gray menu bar. Under new, you'll see under the vendor column, there's an option for bill, new bill. And it will open up a bill screen. You can see that the bill looks an awful lot like the expense form and the check form. So there's a lot of similarities to these. You just have to just note that they are labeled differently in the upper left-hand corner of what they are. Okay, so we're going to enter a bill for Computers by Jenny, $1,345. We bought a brand new computer system from this vendor, and they're going to give us 15 days, net 15 days to pay it. So thank you, Computers by Jenny. All right, so I'm going to go back into QuickBooks. Again, we're going to use the new button, upper left-hand corner, select new. Under the vendor column, we're going to select bill. We'll open up a brand new bill form. And in the upper left-hand corner under vendor, I'm going to type in computers. So Computers by Jenny. The terms are going to be net 15. What is it I'm buying? Computers, right? So we'll call that office expenses. New computer. All right. Having trouble with my shift lock there. I keep putting extra capitals. New computer. $1,345. Okay. And let's say that this is for my South Portland location. So I'll put it under class tracking for South Portland. Okay. And then we'll save. There is an option to schedule a payment in the future. We're not going to do that. We're just going to click save and close, actually. So this little arrow to the right of save and schedule payment, I'm going to click that and instead choose save and close. Okay, so now the bill is recorded. So how do we see the impact of this? So I go to the vendor center. So under my left menu, if I hover over expenses and I slide over and I go into my vendors, click on vendors, I'll see a list of all my vendors and how much I owe them. So we will now, if I scroll down to the letter C, Computers by Jenny, I'll now see $1,345 is due. Okay, so that makes sense. Now, when I'm ready to pay the bill, right, I'm ready to go ahead and pay it. There's different ways of doing it, but since I'm right here, I'll go ahead and slide over. Let me move this over here a little bit. Where it says schedule pay. Oh, we can't find that page you have. Oh, that's nice. All right. That's one of the quirky things about the test drive sometimes. All right, but what I can do is under the new button, let's just do it this way. Under the new button in the upper left-hand corner, right under new, under the vendors column, I'm going to go down to pay bills. So if I'm ready to pay this bill, paying the bill that's the only way that I can remove this bill from payables. Okay. So it shows me here a list of all the outstanding bills, and here I see Computers by Jenny. I just put a check mark next to it. I want to pay this bill. And it's going to ask me what to select an account. Let's say I'm going to select checking account. And instead of scheduling a payment, I could actually write a check for this if I wanted to, right? So if I just click save, Okay, the bill is gone, and then I go ahead and write a check out. I actually made my checking account go negative, right? $568 to the negative. Wasn't enough money in there to pay it, but anyway. So I could then write a check and send that check. And the bill is paid. Okay, so we're out of time tonight. I wanted to just pause and before we end out, I'm willing to hang out for any sort of questions you may have. And hopefully that was helpful. I gave I know just a real brief overview of how expenses work, some common ways of recording expenses. Any questions, any comments? And feel free to unmute if you want, speak up, or one thing I will, before we end, is to let you know, we do run these workshops quite frequently, and we don't have anything scheduled at the moment, but typically every few months we do add a series of workshops. This is kind of the last in the series that we've done. We did kind of an overview in 1 week, and then we did income, and tonight was expenses. And I think the format worked very, very well. So we will expect to repeat this series again. I'm not sure if it will be later this fall, early winter, or perhaps after the holidays in January, somewhere in there. But keep a lookout if you'd like to join any of the other workshops. Also, take advantage of SCORE resources. I myself am not a SCORE mentor, but a SCORE mentorship program is very, very good and very helpful for small businesses. So it's a great resource, and would encourage you to take advantage of those and reach out to your local SCORE chapter and take advantage of those programs. So if you don't have any other questions, thank you so much for joining us. It was nice working with all of you and meeting you. I will be sending out the the slide deck for those of you who were here tonight, in case you want those, and wish you all a great evening. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.